The morning light filtered softly through the kitchen window, its pale gray hue casting long shadows that stretched across the faded wooden floor. The air carried the familiar scent of brewed coffee, a scent I had come to associate with the quiet moments I kept for myself, moments suspended between past and present, filled with memories that both warmed and haunted me. I sat at the kitchen table, my hands wrapped around the warm ceramic cup, seeking a small comfort in its steady heat. My eyes fell again to the faded family photograph that hung crookedly on the wall, a relic of happier days when the house brimmed with laughter and promises. In the frame, my husband smiled softly, his arm protectively around me, while our son Jason stood between us, a boy full of youthful dreams and an innocence that now seemed fragile and distant. Those smiles, once bright and full of hope, had grown dim in my memory, like echoes fading in a long-abandoned room. The silence of the house was thick, almost tangible. Since my husband passed, that silence had become both my refuge and my prison, settling over my days like a heavy veil. The routines I clung to were few and quiet: morning coffee, a book, tending the garden in the afternoons. This small domestic world had become my sanctuary, but also a reminder of how much had been lost. It was during one of these quiet mornings, wrapped in a solitude I had grown reluctant to break, that the phone shattered the stillness. The sharp ringing broke through the gentle hum of the house, and I startled as I reached for the receiver. The plastic felt cold beneath my fingers, grounding me as the voice on the other end began to speak. It was the bank, a voice both calm and serious, delivering a message I was unprepared to hear. They explained in careful but unyielding terms that my savings had been depleted. Each word landed heavily, like stones dropping into a well, echoing endlessly. My heart seized as the bank representative detailed transactions I could scarcely comprehend. Large sums withdrawn, charges made for foreign hotels and resorts, expenses that were far beyond what I could have imagined. It was Jason, they told me, using my hard-earned money to fund a lavish getaway, an indulgence I never approved. Disbelief paralyzed me. How could the son I had raised with all my love do this to me? How could he drain the very account that I nurtured over decades for our family's security? The room felt suddenly colder, as if the walls themselves shivered at the news. I sat still, barely breathing, clutching the receiver as if it were an anchor holding me to reality. The betrayal was a deep, sharp cut, one that went beyond the loss of money. It was the unraveling of trust built over a lifetime. My son, the boy who once clung to my hand, had become a stranger, a man who saw me not as his mother, but as a bank to be emptied without consequence. I turned my gaze back to the photograph, the faces looking back at me with haunting clarity. Jason's confident smirk, once endearing in its youthful boldness, now bore the weight of entitlement and greed. When had this change crept into him unnoticed? What had I missed amidst the daily demands and the quiet hope that love would shield us from harm? The image that once symbolized family warmth now cracked under the weight of deception. The memories surged forth unbidden. The nights I worked late, sacrificing sleep and small comforts to fund his education. The countless moments I put aside my own needs so that he might have every opportunity. The careful balancing act of bills paid on time, groceries bought without complaint, dreams quietly shelved. Each sacrifice now felt futile, like stones cast into a dark abyss that swallowed everything without a trace. Humiliation settled deep within me, a bitter, suffocating cloud that blurred my vision. But the sting was not merely in the loss of what I had saved. It was in the revelation that my son's greed was as profound as it was callous. He had viewed the house not as a home filled with memories and love, but as an asset, a resource to plunder. I was not a mother to him, but a means to his indulgence. The weight of that realization was a burden heavier than I had ever imagined carrying. My hands trembled and fell to the table, the cup of coffee slipping unused from my grasp as tears threatened to spill. They were quiet tears, tears that fell silently, tracing paths down cheeks that had long been lined with the marks of endurance. Grief mingled with outrage, and yet amidst the storm of emotions, a strange calm began to settle. I wrapped my arms around myself as though to contain the silent storm within. The house echoed with memories and loss, the silence now layered with the heavy truth of betrayal. And in that silence, beneath the pain and grief, a seed of resolve took root. I knew then that my response could not be loud or rash. Anger might howl in the moment, but it was patience and quiet strength that would guide me forward. Because sometimes strength hides not in shouting, but in the stillness that follows. Silence held my strength, and in that quiet moment I vowed that though the ground beneath me had shifted, I would not be broken. I would watch, I would wait, and in the calm shadows of betrayal, I would find a way to reclaim what was mine, not with noise or fury, but with a quiet, steady purpose that no one could see coming. The silence that filled the house after that day was no longer an empty void. It became a realm where countless memories flickered and faded, where the lingering weight of betrayal shifted until it transformed into something more purposeful. I did not scream, I did not weep openly. Instead, I sat quietly in my chair, hands folded in my lap. The familiar ache coiled deep in my chest, becoming a strange source of clarity. I refused to let anger have the final word. The past could not be undone, but the future was unwritten, and within me stirred a steady flame of resolve. My mind replayed the countless years I had poured into raising Jason, every sleepless night spent worrying about his future, every sacrifice swallowed in silence so he could have what I could never afford myself. I remembered the long evenings when I sat by his bedside, tracing the fever from his brow, the mornings I got up early to prepare him for achievements I had dreamed of on his behalf. All of it, every penny saved, every quiet prayer whispered, had been for his sake. How deeply ironic, then, that it was he who now erased those efforts with a thoughtless swipe of entitlement. But this was not the time to crumble beneath grief. Instead, I allowed the past to serve as a grim reminder, a flickering map of lessons learned about trust and silence. I understood now how easily love could be mistaken for weakness, how patience might be mistaken for indifference. If Jason believed I was vulnerable, I would show him differently. Not with noisy confrontation or bitter accusations. No, that path was well-worn and empty. Instead, I promised myself a quiet reckoning, one as deliberate and steady as the years I had endured. So I sat in that silence, gathering my shattered pieces with quiet patience. I began to sift through my memories, recalling the subtle signs I'd missed, the moments when Jason's eyes flickered with greed rather than gratitude, when his words dripped with entitlement and disregard. I realized I had been watching through a fog, blinded by hope and maternal love. Now my eyes cleared. The weight of betrayal was no longer just a burden, but a catalyst, a turning point where grief folded into strength. I allowed myself to grieve fully, but only in my own way. Quiet tears came in the dead of night, when the house was still and the world outside had gone dim. I did not need an audience to witness my pain. Instead, I focused outward on the path ahead. The years of silent endurance had given me an unexpected resilience, a patience that now grew into a plan. I began to outline that plan in my mind during long walks around the house, the worn floorboards creaking beneath my feet as if they were witnesses to my slow transformation. Every move Jason made, every reckless decision he had carved into my life would become a stepping stone for me. I would no longer be the quiet victim, the mother quietly consumed by tears behind closed doors. No, I would be the unseen force gathering strength beneath the surface, a presence he couldn't measure or manipulate. The idea took root, revenge, but not the kind spun by anger or violence. Mine would be silent, subtle as a shadow, unrelenting as time. I would reclaim what was mine, piece by piece, without the need for grand statements or emotional outbursts. I recognized the power in quiet perseverance, the steady dismantling of control he believed he held. I felt the cool clarity of resolve settle in my chest, steadying my trembling hands. Late at night, before sleep found me, my thoughts turned to the sacrifices I had made. Each was a reminder of the strength that had guided me through years of quiet struggle. Though Jason had taken from me, I was not without resources. Years ago, I had learned a great deal about legal matters, guided gently through papers and contracts by my husband before he passed. I had hidden knowledge that he never suspected, and it gave me a silent advantage. Imagining the day when he might finally realize that his supposed victory was an illusion, a house of cards built on borrowed time, sent a strange thrill through me. For now, I remained guarded, watching and waiting. Fishermen don't shout when setting their nets, neither would I. I understood the value of timing, of knowing when to act and when to be patient. For days, I resisted the temptation to call him, to confront him with my pain or anger. I knew that would only feed his arrogance. Silence was my weapon, patience my shield. I allowed him to believe he had won, even as I began to gather the quiet strength for what was to come. The walls of our home, once so full of comfortable memories, now whispered of a battle fought not with noise, but with resolve. The aching burden I carried was no longer just pain, but a forge where my patience was hammered into steel. I remembered the lessons life had taught me, that sometimes the greatest power is found not in words, but in enduring stillness. My vision cleared, and I saw the path ahead with brutal honesty. Jason's greed was a mask he wore, brittle and thin. Beneath it was vulnerability, one I intended to expose without ever lifting my voice. I did not seek to destroy him. I sought to reclaim my dignity, my home, my peace. And I would do so with the quiet determination of a mother who had learned the hard way that silence could be as powerful as any scream. My plan would unfold in calm shadows. My actions would speak louder than any confrontation ever could. In the depths of that quiet, I found unexpected inspiration. My scars told a story of endurance. My solitude had become a forge of strength. I was not a broken woman hiding behind tears, but a force gathering patiently, purposefully, ready to rise. The years of pain and sacrifice had prepared me for this moment. I was ready to move forward, not with anger, but with the steady heartbeat of justice whispered softly in silence. The days that followed unfolded like a quiet storm just beneath the surface of my calm exterior. Each morning, I performed the familiar rituals of my daily routine, the careful brewing of coffee, the soft creak of the kitchen floor under my feet, the slow folding of laundry, yet my mind was alight with a determined purpose. Jason's betrayal had shattered the fragile piece of my world, yet with that fracture came clarity. Within the chaos lay opportunity, a chance to take back control and reclaim what was mine. The first step was gathering undeniable truth. I spent hours under the gentle glow of my desk lamp, tracing every transaction through bank statements and financial records. The numbers formed a damning narrative: luxury hotels, extravagant dinners, costly gadgets. Each charge was a fresh wound, a reckless indulgence funded by the years I had painstakingly saved, the sacrifices I had made in silence. The pattern was clear and unforgiving. I wasn't dealing with a careless son, I was confronting calculated greed. Realizing the complexity of what awaited me, I sought out my old friend Lucy, a lawyer whose steadiness had guided our family through difficult times before. Her office felt like a sanctuary of order amid my chaos, filled with the comforting scent of leather-bound volumes and the faint hum of learned minds at work. Presenting her with the thick folder of evidence, statements, contracts, letters, I saw the immediate focus sharpen in her eyes. She offered no sympathy, only the kind of unwavering professionalism I needed. Lucy's approach was methodical. She explained the intricate web of property law, inheritance rights, and legal protections I could invoke. More importantly, she emphasized subtlety. Justice was not a hammer to be wielded blindly, but a fine scalpel that demanded patience and precision. She warned against loud confrontations or impulsive action that would only feed Jason's arrogance and fuel his miscalculations. Our strategy was to dismantle his illusion with quiet, unassailable strength. One of the most critical discoveries was a hidden account established years ago by my late husband with Lucy's counsel, a secondary reserve fund protected by tiers of legal safeguards. This nest egg was untouchable by Jason or anyone else without my explicit consent. It was a safety net I had long known existed but had never fully relied upon. Now it became the keystone of my plan, a reservoir of quiet power to support the coming battle for justice. Guided by Lucy, I began transferring surviving assets into fortified accounts shielded with legal documents crafted to keep Jason at bay. We initiated carefully calibrated legal actions to freeze transactions, challenge fraudulent transfers, and recover lost property. Each document signed, every filing sent, was a stealthy maneuver, a step toward reclaiming my security without alerting my enemy. The quiet complexity of these actions was a stark contrast to Jason's brash confidence. He believed the spoils were his by right. Balance was vital. While the legal machinery churned steadily in the background, I maintained the outward appearance of ordinary life. I tended to the garden, folded clothes with deliberate care, and kept the house in order. Small interactions with neighbors revealed whispers of Jason's growing debts and reckless spending, but none suspected the silent war waged just below the surface. I remained an enigma of calm resilience, a mother who had turned agony into steel. Observation became a weapon as vital as any legal document. Through careful listening and quiet inquiry, I pieced together the unraveling of Jason's facade. His circle of friends grew smaller, his debts widened, yet his bravado remained intact, a fortress of false confidence built on borrowed time. The thought of his inevitable downfall fueled my resolve with a fierce urgency. I imagined the moment when the illusion would shatter, layered pretenses crumbling before the truth I was set to unveil. Evenings were bathed in soft lamplight, and I found myself surrounded by relics of a happier past. Photographs faded with time, but burned brightly in memory. Letters and keepsakes told stories of love and sacrifice I had silently carried through the years. Packing these into boxes was cathartic, a symbolic casting off of the grief and betrayal that threatened to overwhelm me. Each sealed box was a fragment of pain let go, a step toward reclaiming control and dignity. Though my heart ached for the son I thought I knew, that grief no longer weakened me. Instead, it forged a steely purpose. I was no longer the broken woman overwhelmed by loss. I was a mother, hardened by endurance, fortified by the lessons of long years. The sacrifices I had made were not in vain. They had become the foundation of my strength. Lucy's unwavering support was a lifeline, anchored by her knowledge and calm determination. Together, we navigated the complex legal labyrinth that Jason's recklessness had exposed. Document after document, we built a case, one not just for financial restitution, but for the restoration of my rightful place. Jason's ego had blinded him to the fact that he was no match for patience wielded as a weapon. As Jason indulged in excess, his empire of illusion unraveled unseen. While he lived in denial, I wove a tapestry of quiet justice that grew stronger by the day. The slow but sure turn of events was a comfort against the chaos his actions had left in their wake. Between moments of legal work and observation, I found unexpected peace in the stillness. There was power in silence, a power I never underestimated again. My strategy took form, calm, precise, unstoppable. The day would come when Jason's arrogance would dissolve, and the quiet woman he underestimated would be revealed as the true force of consequence. I was ready, not motivated by anger, but by a steady conviction honed through hardship. Piece by piece, I was reclaiming my dignity and my home. No shouting was necessary. My plan would speak in the language of undeniable truth and relentless resolve, quietly but profoundly changing the course of our lives. With every dawn that broke over the quiet streets surrounding my home, a new chapter unfolded beneath the surface of my composed exterior. The plan I had painstakingly crafted with Lucy's guidance was now set in motion, precise and deliberate. Yet the outward appearance remained unchanged. A woman going about her daily life, tending her garden, collecting mail, and nursing a cup of tea by the window. There was a strange comfort in the mundane, a grounding to balance the storm swirling beneath. First, the movement of assets. I arranged for the remaining funds in my accounts to be transferred discreetly into secure holdings I controlled. The transfers were executed with procedural care, no alarm raised, no impulsive rashness betrayed. It was a dance of patience masked by routine, shrouded in the everyday. Every step was shielded by legal safeguards, steel woven into paperwork, layers between Jason and the money he believed his by right. Parallel to this, we initiated the legal processes to claw back what was lost. Documents were crafted to challenge unauthorized transactions, all evidence meticulously gathered and presented with cold precision. The house itself, that repository of memories and whispered family stories, became central. While Jason imagined it as simply a pawn in his game, I began the complex process of preparing it for sale, not out of surrender, but as strategic leverage. A home holds memories, yes, but in my hands, it was also currency, a means to an end, a tool in reclaiming justice. Packing the house was both stern business and quiet ritual. Each box sealed was a farewell to illusions and a statement of control. I kept only a few treasured items close: a faded quilt my mother had made, a set of china that had seen countless family dinners, and the photograph where my husband's arm rested warmly around me. These relics were anchors to the past, but the future was being scripted with far firmer, quieter hands. Throughout this process, silence remained my most potent ally. Jason's calls went unanswered, his messages silently archived. I refused to engage, to feed his sense of entitlement with even a flicker of response. Let him bask in false confidence, the illusion of victory. That blindness was his undoing. As the legal wheels turned, I observed a subtle unraveling in Jason's facade through whispers and fractured rumors. His debts grew louder in the circles he frequented, the financial strain beginning to seep into the life of luxury he'd imagined. Meanwhile, I moved steadily forward, the house's paperwork flowing like clockwork through Lucy's watchful hands. The property was sold quietly, the negotiations discreet, the proceeds safely tucked away in accounts that Jason could not touch. Each contract signed, every key handed over to new owners, was a marker of reclaimed dignity. I watched the house fade from my life as a tangible asset, but it remained sacred in memory, a battlefront where control was wrested back in silence. The sale was not a defeat, but a deliberate, empowered choice, a stepping stone to freedom. The shadow of this transformation stretched over my encounters with neighbors and friends. No one saw the truth behind my calm demeanor, the storm I contained within. I smiled gently when asked about Jason, listening to polite gossip of his presumed success and prosperity. Beneath that smile was a quiet knowledge. The facade was cracking. The edifice Jason built on borrowed wealth was faltering. Evenings brought quiet reflection. Sometimes I sat alone in the living room, surrounded by the glow of lamplights and the gentle hum of the night. The house was emptier now, but ironically, that emptiness felt freeing. The silence was no longer oppressive. It was peace, hard-won and precious. I found myself breathing easier, shoulders relaxed from carrying invisible burdens too long. I allowed myself to feel the slow, steady pulse of empowerment growing with each careful step taken. The path was long and far from easy. There were moments of exhaustion and doubt, nights when the weight of solitude pressed heavily. But dawn always came, bringing resolve forged in the crucible of betrayal and quiet persistence. Jason's ignorance of the strategy unfolding under his nose was a bitter truth I savored privately. He was unaware as I emptied the accounts he'd plundered, repurposed the assets he had believed his, and orchestrated legal moves that quietly stripped him of his ill-gotten gains. He thought silence was weakness. I knew it was strength, a force deeper than any shouted accusation. Throughout this time, I maintained my patience and poise. I refused to let the pain of betrayal dictate my actions. Instead, I let legal precision, steadfast silence, and measured steps carve out my justice. My restraint was not submission. It was power harnessed, a deliberate and unyielding will that no one, not even Jason, could break. The network Lucy and I navigated was a labyrinth, intricate and demanding, but necessity sharpened my resolve. The documents, court appointments, and financial maneuvers formed a complex chessboard where every move was calculated to cripple Jason's false security while safeguarding my rightful claims. I watched as time chipped away at the fortress Jason had built with such arrogance. Reports trickled in about his mounting debts, creditors calling, pressured conversations behind closed doors. The lavish lifestyle was unraveling quietly, layers peeling back beneath my steady gaze. Meanwhile, my pockets of power grew firmer, invisible but unshakable. Finally, the day came when the relentless grind began to show clear results. The carefully filed documents unsettled one of Jason's major accounts, forcing him to scramble. Legal letters arrived, sealed and formal, demanding accountability. My name re-emerged in places he hoped to avoid. His long-held illusion of control fractured, the foundations cracking under legal scrutiny. Yet I met all this with calm determination. There was no joy in his struggle, only the quiet satisfaction that justice, patient and unrelenting, was finally weaving its way through the shadows. I had waited for this moment patiently, gathering strength day by day, and now it was unfolding exactly as planned. As the house passed from my hands, as the financial blinds shifted, and as legal action gained momentum, I felt a remarkable lightness. The burden of secrets, lies, and stolen futures began to lift. I was not merely surviving betrayal, I was rising above it. This silent battle had reshaped me. No longer the woman weighed by loss and deception, I was now the architect of my own destiny. Quiet vengeance, patient and unyielding, was my creed. The echoes of my past had paved the way for a future reclaimed, not through fury, but through steadfast resolve and unwavering silence. With each legal paper filed, with each asset secured, I reclaimed a piece of myself. The path was long, but it was mine. Jason's illusions would fall, not with a deafening crash, but with the quiet certainty of justice served, slowly, deliberately, and mercilessly. The moment Jason returned to the house, his confidence unshaken and his voice loud with empty bravado, I was prepared. He swaggered through the familiar rooms, recounting escapades as though the world owed him a debt he could spend without measure. Yet I sat across from him, still and composed, harboring a quiet strength he could neither see nor understand. I spoke calmly, without accusation or bitterness. Recounting the reality his reckless choices had seeded, I told him about the accounts no longer accessible to him, about the safeguards that had been put in place to protect what remained. I showed him how the house had been sold quietly, the proceeds shielded where he could not touch them. I detailed each legal step we had taken, the battles fought in silence, turning the tide of control slowly but inevitably from his grasp back into mine. Shock flickered across his face, slowly eroding his brash arrogance. The veneer cracked as the weight of undeniable truth pressed upon him. His once bold eyes now searched mine for a trace of mercy, a hint of weakness, yet there was none to offer. This was not a place for pity or fury, but the cold bearing of justice finally delivered. I watched as certainty began to break down his carefully built illusions. His empire, once seemingly invincible, was exposed as fragile and hollow. The questions he stammered, the desperate pleas to be spared, their futility was apparent. He had forgotten that actions, no matter how quiet, have consequences. The reckoning had arrived. He left the house silent, his departure echoing a profound absence where entitlement had once dwelled. The spaces around me felt lighter, as if the very walls exhaled relief. The tension that had hung like a shroud for so long lifted, replaced by a gentle quiet that spoke of truth reclaimed. Afterward, I felt a freedom unlike any I had known. The weight of grief and deceit, once so suffocating, began to ease. This was more than survival, it was rebirth. Rising from the ashes of betrayal, I embraced a new beginning forged through patience and resolve. I moved to a smaller, cozier home, modest but serene. It lacked the grandeur of our past life, but brimmed with peace. I surrounded myself with cherished mementos, a quilt my mother crocheted, delicate china used in family gatherings, faded photographs that told stories of love and shared dreams. These objects grounded me, reminding me that while material things fade, the strength they inspire endures. The silence here was different, no longer a heaviness, but a healing balm. I spent countless hours in reflection, tears sometimes falling unbidden, not out of sorrow but release. These were tears of transformation, shedding old wounds and making space for renewal. With each passing day, I felt the quiet power of empowerment grow within me. My revenge had been neither loud nor vengeful, it was subtle, precise, and just. Like an invisible current reshaping the tide, it altered the course of my life without spectacle, unseen except by those who lived its consequences. I understood then that true power often dwells in silence and perseverance, not noise and fury. I no longer needed to fight for recognition or validation. My silence spoke volumes. In embracing patience and steadfastness, I reclaimed my dignity, my voice, and ultimately my power. The peace I found was profound, forged not by shouting but by enduring calm. This new life, born from betrayal but defined by resilience, was mine to build. The lessons of patience and quiet observation had become my strongest allies. The woman I had become was no longer broken or defeated. She was a mother forged in hardship, shaped by pain into a force both gentle and unyielding. Sometimes, in the quiet hours, I laughed softly, marveling at the irony that the deepest truths could be spoken without a single word. Those who sought to diminish me had overlooked the strength that silence carried. In stillness, I had found my voice, not one heard in clamor, but felt in the spaces between words and actions. The road I walked was long and demanding, but it belonged to me. With each step, I reclaimed not only what was stolen, but the very essence of my being. The journey had changed me, but I embraced that change. I was steady, strong, and ready to face whatever came next, fortified by the knowledge that my quiet resolve was the most powerful force of all. The house was quiet now, its silence no longer filled with pain, but with the kind of peace that only comes after a long winter of turmoil. When Jason finally left, the weight he carried with him seemed to lift off the walls, the floors, and even the air itself. His absence carved out space where healing could begin, where the heavy cloak of betrayal and disappointment loosened its grip. Moving into a smaller home, stripped of the past's grandeur but rich with promise, felt like stepping into a sanctuary I had long hidden from myself. The rooms were simple, light streaming through windows with a softness that invited calm. I filled this new space with fragments of my life, my mother's quilt, worn but comforting, delicate china collected over decades, old photographs, faded around the edges but bursting with moments of joy and love. These weren't mere decorations, but a tapestry woven from resilience, hope, and the steady strength of family roots. Evenings became my sanctuary. Sometimes I would sit quietly near the window, a cup of tea warming my hands, watching shadows stretch and dance on the walls. Tears came then, often without warning, not out of sorrow, but as a pure release. They washed away the years of hidden anguish, the silent burdens I had carried beneath a composed exterior. In these small, sacred moments, I felt myself rebuilt, piece by careful piece. The revenge I exacted was never loud nor vengeful. It was like water slowly reshaping stone, patient, persistent, and ultimately unstoppable. I realized then that true power is in the quiet endurance, in the ability to wait and move with purpose, not fury. The silence that had once felt suffocating became my voice, speaking louder than any angry shout ever could. I no longer needed others to affirm my pain or justify my worth. My silence grew into a language of its own, a powerful statement of dignity reclaimed. Through patience and unwavering resolve, I recovered not just material things, but the core of my identity. The peace that settled within was deep and profound, shaped by the fires of adversity, but solidified through silent strength. This new chapter, born from betrayal yet defined by resilience, became mine to write. The lessons learned from years of observing, waiting, and planning transformed into my greatest allies. I was no longer a woman broken by loss. I was a mother strengthened by experience, gentle but unyielding. The scars of the past became marks of endurance, reminders of how far I had come. In the stillness of the night, I often smiled quietly to myself, marveling at the irony that the deepest truths often need no spoken words. Those who tried to diminish me missed the profound force carried in silence. In the spaces between words and actions, I found my true voice, a voice that didn't raise volume, but resonated with undeniable power. The road ahead was long and demanding, yet it was mine to walk. Each steady step reclaimed not just what had been stolen, but the very essence of my being. The woman I had become was steady, strong, and ready to face whatever life had in store, fortified by a quiet resolve that nothing could break.